So I'm delighted to say, joining us for the very first time on the We Are West Ham podcast is the Sun's West Ham correspondent, Jordan Davies. Jordan, how are you getting on, mate? You've been pestering me for absolutely months to come on and be a big star on the We Are West Ham podcast. Use our platform to launch you into superstardom among Hammers fans. Great to have you with us, mate. You were at the game yesterday. How's it going?
Good, yeah. It was a surprising result. I don't think any of us really were discussing the potential of a 3-1 victory when we were all sat in the press room. And yeah, it's just a fantastic result really for West Ham, and you could almost sense in the crowd at full time that this result just kind of lifts morale a bit. I know West Ham fans haven't been entirely happy with the window, and it's not been as quick as they would like it to be in getting players in. But this performance, this result, really will give. I know it sounds crazy 2 games in, but it will give David Moyes a bit of breathing space. I mean, he has been under pressure, but I really do think that this was a humongous win, especially with Brighton and then Luton and Man City coming up, that he needed a standout performance and standout result. And this was it. Saying that, it could have been a lot different had Enzo Fernandez scored his penalty, had Chelsea taken advantage of some of the chances they had. But as Moyes said, this was a classic West Ham display under him. It was nitty, it was gritty. They held out. There was a low block for a lot of the game, which they seemed to get away with. And just all smiles in East London.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You know, you've sort of echoed the exact stuff that me and Jonesy said in the intro, and you listened to the podcast last week, obviously. And well, it might not be obvious, to be fair. I don't suppose it's that obvious, but yeah, and you know, it was difficult. And we were saying that it just felt weird after the Bournemouth game, saying the first game of the season is a must-win, because there just wasn't a belief. And I think you almost get swept up in the negativity sometimes, and we do our level best on this podcast to not do that and try and stay measured and look holistically at things, and just sort of acknowledge that, you know, this is the best time of supporting West Ham in our history. And Moyes had a bit of an average season in the Premier League last season, but it wasn't like really relegation threatened. It wasn't supersonic bad like we've seen within the past decade or so. We do try and hold on to that, but I think it's easy to get swept up in, or at least have that negativity affect you, especially when you go on Twitter every day. But I'll be honest, and we fell into that, I think, last week, and you just felt, not beating Bournemouth, we beat them so convincingly away at the end of last season. Some difficult fixtures coming up. You just felt, something was a bit missing. But as James made the point already, Moyes had a sort of knack since he's been at the club of just pulling out results, A, when you don't expect them, but B, when he really needs them. Whenever the pressure's really ramping up on him, he just seems to pull an absolute worldie of a result or performance out the bag, which is obviously excellent stuff. And I don't know, what was sort of, you obviously follow it from with a little bit less emotion than me and Jonesy do, of course, in a professional capacity. What's your sense and feeling been? You've been covering West Ham for what, 18 months? Is it a year? Or you tell me. But what's your sense? How have you found it, sort of viewing it from your position?
Well, to be honest, I've kind of had, I'd say, the luckiest time covering West Ham. I came in February 2022, which was kind of in the middle of the amazing Europa League run and getting to Frankfurt, and not thinking it could really get any better than that. And then suddenly I find myself in Prague and I'm seeing Jared Bowen run through and score a winning goal in a European final for West Ham. It really has been incredible. I do understand where the negativity comes from, because I think there is the expectation, and David Moyes has been a victim of his own success. He's risen the expectation by finishing in 6th and 7th, and I think West Ham fans now want a bit more consistency, not just pull it out the bag against Chelsea when you need to. Or the amount of times last season I wrote the line "must-win game" for David Moyes, or being on the brink of the sack, and it got a bit, not boring. Boring is the wrong word, but it just got a bit strange to write every time, because you think, well, how many times can a manager be on the brink of a sack and yet take a team to a European semi-final or final? It's a strange one. Although yesterday the atmosphere around Moyes, he went round the pitch and clapped everyone, and there did seem to be last season there was a lot of West Ham fans probably some West Ham fans maybe would have been happy to see the back of him last season. Whereas I feel as though we saw at the game yesterday that the West Ham fans really do back him, and they really do want him to succeed. And he's got another European run, and if he does well in that again, they'll love me even more. But yeah,
I think with that, sorry to interrupt you, but I think that, and the thing is, and we're guilty of it as well, right? Is that it's moments like that and games like that remind you that the vast majority of people in the West Ham stadium who pay their money and go every week aren't on Twitter. Do you know, most fans are just fairly normal, sort of level-headed people who, you know, Twitter is literally designed so you see the vitriol, isn't it? And I think that it's always games like that. And we're obviously, you know, sort of part of our professions and stuff, and you're on those sort of platforms regularly. Really, chat to my dad. My dad doesn't know what a Twitter is. Like, you know, he's just getting to grips with his iPhone, for God's sake. I just find it hard to... I just think it reminds you that most West Ham fans are just fairly level-headed and all want the manager to succeed, like you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and it just reminds me, actually, I got home and just had a scroll through Twitter, and the first comment I saw was someone saying James Ward-Prowse, he had one good corner, and that was it. And you just kind of sit there and think, this is a brand new signing who had a very good game. Yes, an amazing corner, but he also set up Antonio's goal, and just that buzz and obviously from the press box you can kind of look at the game from quite high up, and you can see how Souček and Ward-Prowse work together in that compact two, and Lucas Paqueta coming to help as well, and there are signs that he will be a very, very good signing for West Ham. And Edson Alvarez, I know he had a short cameo, but he as well looks like I saw him in the mix zone. He is an absolute unit. I didn't realise how big he is. I mean, I'm over 6 foot, and I was looking up at him, speaking to him. He's a very, very big guy.
You're talking to two lads who are less than 5'10" here. We don't need those sort of reminders on the podcast.
No. Oh well, don't go for a bit with Edson Alvarez, because you were even smaller. But yeah, I think there needs to be a bit of faith now back in him that he can get some signings in that will improve the team. I know last summer 8 signings, 2 or 3 worked, if that. And I know there's some debate over the likes of Thilo Kehrer and Maxwell Cornet, but I do feel as though he is bringing in players that he thinks will improve the team, and you're seeing that already.
Jordan, what more business is he going to do? Obviously, we're led to believe that Mavropanos is very close, and he'll be a centre-back signing to see the alternative to Harry Maguire. The feeling amongst West Ham fans is that, Mikel Antonio scored against Chelsea. It was a great finish, probably his best finish in a West Ham shirt, and one of the best. But we still desperately need an actual striker who can score more than consistently score 10, 15 goals a season. Is that still on Moyes' radar? Because he's brought in a couple of midfielders, which so far so good, but that's it. And we're still very light in other areas of the squad, which is probably why West Ham fans still a little bit and over whether Moyes is the right man, because he's taken so long to get this business done.
Yeah, no, just on what you said about Mavropanos, yeah, that's correct. He was at the ground yesterday to watch the game. That should be announced shortly. So I think he's now happy with his centre-back options. He still wants to improve the midfield. I mean, he still wants Mohamed Kudus. I know the bid was rejected. They're trying again. Tim Steidten, the technical director, is really pushing hard that one. That's one of his kind of
from Ajax,
ones that that he wants to get over. Tim Steidten's been in Holland a lot to try and get this one over the line, and from what we're hearing, West Ham should be putting in another bid for him. In terms of the striking
that to be done,
option,
then, Jordan. Sorry, just quickly, you expect that to be done? What sort of level, price wise?
I don't think West Ham want to go 50 million. I think if they can get in for 45 and with some add-ons, or kind of getting close to 50 million, I think they will go there. If it goes anywhere near past that, then I think they'll maybe move on to other targets. So yeah, hopefully that's done. And then if that is done, and Lucas Paqueta does stay, then you're looking at that midfield and thinking that's quite a tasty midfield that can do a lot. And also Kudus can play out wide, so Moyes wants those options as well for out wide. In terms of the striker, I know, Will, you've got very strong thoughts on Jared Bowen being played down the middle. David Moyes.
You
he
mean
does this
Jared Bowen, our right winger, who's our best player last season? Yeah. Go on, carry on.
Yeah, David Moyes does this thing in press conferences where, if he wants to send a message, he'll keep on repeating himself in different press conferences every time. And he said in the last 3 or 4 press conferences that Jared Bowen has the ability to play down the middle, which is why he is looking out wide to maybe bring in a winger. That's why Kudus, again, a midfielder who can play out wide, he may try and push him out wide. Maxwell Corney, he may well try and use. He still thinks Maxwell Corney can play down the middle. I'm not so sure. I'm in a bit of halfway house with this Jared Bowen down the middle, because I do think he has the capabilities, but I do also agree that his best position is out on the right, taking players on and cutting inside or getting to the byline. So that's where Moyes is right now. He is still open to signing a striker, but I think I asked him the other day, "Are you happy with Mubama, Ings, Antonio, and maybe Cornet down the middle?" And he said, "If I'm left with that, then I'd be happy with that." So I think he's content with what he has. I think he's content with what he has right now. But again, he is still open. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if in the next couple of games, maybe Luton away, he tries Bowen down the middle, or maybe in the Carabao Cup, which I think is at the end of the month, he may try Bowen down the middle. He's desperate to try it, so that if it pays off, he can say, "I told you so. I've been mentioning it for a couple of weeks." So, I think that'll be directed straight at you, Will, if he does go for down the middle.
Potentially. So yeah, I mean, look, sort of fair enough on that front. I just find it annoying. He's so good at linking. He's our key man of linking our defence to the attack. Like the amount of times he picks up the ball fairly deep, drives it forward, beats someone, holds it up in the corners, enables everyone else to move up the pitch. I think, it's all very well having him up front saying he can play there. Yeah, but who's going to be getting the ball to him? He already does that job so well. But anyway, that's one for another day, especially after we've just beaten Chelsea at home 3-1. The Lucas Paqueta situation, Jordan's obviously a bit of a delicate one at the moment. Investigation ongoing. There's only so much you can say. Showed real passion after scoring that no-look penalty at the weekend. He's a class act, an absolute Rolls Royce of a player. It appears the Man City move is sort of off, or at least called, but he's by all reports been really professional, showed loads of passion after scoring the goal. Probably been a stressful time for him. What do you make of that situation? Where do you see it going, based on obviously what you're sort of limited by what you can and can't say at the moment?
Yeah, it's a tough situation, and obviously the club are being quite and they're hesitant to give any more information on it right now, which is perfectly understandable. Yeah, I was incredibly impressed. I maybe thought Moyes may try and bench him just to take him out of the spotlight. He didn't. He got involved from the first minute, kind of complaining at referees and kind of getting stuck in tackles, which is what he always does. But it was, yeah, and for someone who's got this looming over him, I've just been incredibly impressed by his attitude. It really shows that he's committed to this team, to the club. And Moyes said after the game that I didn't even have a thought to even speak to him about it, because he's just that sort of kind of that player. I think, and we've heard that he's just a bit of a nutcase, really. He doesn't care what anyone says. He doesn't care what kind of happens in previous games. He just goes out and does his own thing whenever he wants. And I think again, it depends on what happens with this investigation and on what happens. But I think West Ham fans can be really excited and not need to worry, because Moyes A is definitely going to play him. He always plays his best players no matter what is going on. And B, I just feel like he's really invested. I know his head has been slightly turned by Man City. I
hate that phrase. I hate it so much.
Do you hate it? it?
Yeah. And look, I mean, you've written in stories, loads of like journalists have, not just for Paqueta, for everyone. How do you gauge it? What do you mean his head's been like? I don't understand how you gauge someone's head has been turned. His head has been turned so many times. It's done a full 360, like the scene in Saw where they screw the bloke's head off. What does that even mean? Like, what is he's interested, or what?
I think it's more kind of when you're talking to agents or when you're talking to people around him, sometimes they change their tone, because normally when you talk to an agent, he says, yeah, the player's really happy, he's delighted. Whereas sometimes you get the line, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens at the end of a window. That normally indicates that a player is either in discussions with his agent or he's deliberating what to do. And that's normally like agent code for kind of how that goes. So that's the only reason I say head turned. But what I was
is it basically just anything beyond anything that isn't no, he's not interested in that move counts as head turning?
No, I think it has to be a little bit more than that. I think if they say no, he's definitely staying at West Ham, that's fine. If it's more, we're kind of seeing what's out there. We're kind of we're not going to make any concrete decisions right now. I think you can kind of guarantee that then the player is in talks with his agent and saying, "Oh, Man City are interested. What's happening here?" So yeah. But in terms of what's going to happen, if the investigation comes to nothing, then West Ham likely will keep hold of that player. Depends what happens in this investigation and this hearing. But for now, I wouldn't be worried if I was a West Ham fan. He's going to play every minute that he can.
So Jordan, based on the first 2 games of the season, bearing in mind that the first 2 games, I think it was the first 4 games last season, we lost all of them. This season, we're unbeaten in the first 2. What do you think we should be expecting as West Ham fans in this season? It's still early days, obviously. We've still got 10 days of the window. So I think a lot of stuff can change between now and then. But what do you think we should be expecting for the season, and maybe particularly in Europe as well, to be fair?
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited for the draw on September 1st for the Europa League, because I think West Ham actually have a chance of getting quite an exciting draw. I know the last 2 draws have been not very kind of sexy teams, if you want, but I think that could be really exciting. In terms of the league, I do feel that the next couple of games will show a lot. I mean, Brighton, West Ham just don't have a good record against Brighton. They always seem to get battered by Brighton, which
of the century, but yeah.
Which I've been at the last 2, and it's just been there's been like an inevitability that Brighton are just going to kind of steamroller them. So I think if West Ham put a really good performance in against Brighton and then get a result away at Luton going into that Man City game, I really feel as though Moyes can go for a top 10 finish, perhaps more this season. I'm not going to say too much in case this is pulled up and suddenly West Ham are 15th in March and I'm ridiculed. But I do really feel that they're going to make a few more signings before the end of the window, and they'll just have a very solid, good squad, and Moyes can work with that. And yeah, I do feel top 10 is a possibility, but I'm intrigued to see how they get on at Brighton and then against Luton. And then if they come through those 2 games without any scars, then who knows?
I think, to be fair, these days, I mean, we've got Joe Sayers on later on from Albion Obsessed to chat about that game. And yeah, I mean, anything less than a 4-0 defeat counts as like a scarless experience for West Ham these days. It's genuinely more of a write-off than Man City away. It's just absolutely ridiculous. But look, Brighton doing some amazing things so far this season. So I think they'll be turning over a few teams. Well, look, Jordan, it's been absolutely brilliant having you on. Before we let you go, we'll get you on again this season, no doubt. Can you sort of have a word with the rest of the West Ham pack and just journalist pack in general, journalists you come across, and perhaps pitch the idea of like every time the phrase head turned is used, you give like the amount of degrees it's been turned. So like, if there's like the interest isn't that much, it's just like 10 degrees slightly to the right. So you see a little bit of profile. But then if it's like loads, it's like 270 degrees almost the whole way around. Because, yeah, if I hear Dharma Sheth say it on Sky Sports News one more time, I think I'm going to like rip my ears off, because he must have, I reckon he needs that tattooed on the inside of his arm. Head has been turned inside name here. Yeah, mental. Yeah. Look, Jordan, it's been absolutely great. Thanks for giving us your thoughts. Jordan Davies there, West Ham correspondent for the Sun newspaper. Go and follow Jordan on Twitter. He's obviously in all the press conferences and stuff. Well in there with all things West Ham news-wise as well. If you love your transfers, then hit Jordan up on Twitter. See his stuff in the Sun as well. Stay